Well, you can say everything about this was so good that no one was phoning it in. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. Today we're talking about a newer release, The Black Phone. Before we begin, let me know in the comments what your thoughts on this movie were, if you already saw it, or if you were planning on seeing it, and make sure to hit that thumbs up button if you like these reviews, as it helps me out immensely by getting my content out there. And if you're new here, I hope you consider hitting that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with more movie-related content like horror reviews on a near-daily basis. But let's not waste any more time and let's talk about The Black Phone. This focuses on a 13-year-old boy who, after being abducted by a child killer and locked in a soundproof basement, starts receiving calls on a disconnected phone from the killer's previous victims. This got a theatrical release in June. It's directed by Scott Derrickson, who also co-wrote the screenplay with C. Robert Cargill, and it's based on the short story of the same name by Joe Hill. And I was pretty excited for this one, though I do have to admit I did have some very slight hesitations, because I've only seen two other Scott Derrickson movies before this. One was Doctor Strange, which I did like, but the other one, which is the only horror movie of his that I saw prior to this, was Sinister, which, admittedly, I wasn't a huge fan of. I know some people really like it. I haven't seen it in years. I should give it another shot, but first time seeing it, wasn't a fan. So I did have some very slight skepticism going into this, even though I did hear a lot of good things from its festival run. But now that I did see it, I gotta say, I really enjoyed this and was actually pleasantly surprised by how much I liked it. Now, I wouldn't necessarily say it's one of the scariest movies out there, even though it's classified as a horror and it does evoke some horror imagery, in particular the masks our villain uses. It felt closer to a thriller, with some supernatural elements thrown in there. Though that's not exactly a bad thing, as the execution of all these elements for the most part was pretty smooth. Now, there's some wonky acting, particularly from some of the supporting child actors, and some of its attempts at being sentimental did come off a bit on the cornier side at times, but for the most part, this was a gripping horror thriller with a great atmosphere. Derrickson's direction in particular is solid here, setting a fittingly eerie tone for such an uncomfortable story, and even presenting an air of disorientation at times, such as during moments where our villain, known as the Grabber, played by Ethan Hawke, strikes. And then a lot of these sequences taking place within this house will leave you on the edge of your seat. The way this works is, our lead, Finney, played by Mason Thames, will get these phone calls from previous victims of the Grabber, and they tell him the different ways they attempted to escape, and they might make a note of something they did wrong. And then we'll see Finney attempt each of those before the Grabber comes back down. And these moments will feel like real nail-biters, as it'll be this race against time, with this air of dread looming over the sequence, as we're expecting the Grabber to just appear around the corner at any second. It might have a bit of that rinse and repeat structure to it, but Derrickson does such an excellent job of crafting the tension in each scene that that'll be the furthest thing from your mind. And let's talk about the performances. Ethan Hawke as the Grabber is excellent. If nothing else, his performance alone makes this worth watching. Now, I've seen some complaints about the character himself, saying we don't really get to learn more about him, and I get that. We do learn one piece of crucial information about him, which plays an important part later on, but otherwise he remains this mostly mysterious figure who's been a menace to this neighborhood for quite some time. Plus, we also know he can be a bit unpredictable in that one minute he might seem like he comes off as reasonable, but then the next he's screeching or doing something really bizarre, or he acts in extremes. And that's about all we ever really know about him. Now, I get where that criticism's coming from, as you don't want your characters feeling too one-dimensional, but I thought Hawke gave such a fantastic performance and conveyed just how much of a threat he is, and I thought it was pretty forgivable we don't really learn much about him. And I mean, I took it more as the character's just supposed to be this pure evil dude who acts more as this looming presence than anything else. Almost like a Michael Myers, except in this instance the Grabber talks. So I think that allowed this to work for me. But it's also worth noting the performances of our two younger leads. I already mentioned Mason Thames as Finney, who was very compelling here, but you also have Madeline McGraw as his sister Gwen, who has her own subplot throughout this as she tries looking for her brother. And I gotta say, both were great here. The characters themselves are given very distinct personalities, especially Gwen, and they get to do something you don't always get to see in horror movies, and it's just play kids who are neither just your stereotypical creepy kid, or these disturbed protagonists who act cryptic and weird and something's off about them. They get to be, for the most part, pretty normal kids here. Now, there are supernatural elements to the story, even beyond this disconnected phone that Finney uses, that does play a part into things, which I won't get to as I think it gets into spoiler territory. And the film never truly explains how any of these things are actually possible, and I thought that would bother me, but honestly, it won't be the biggest deal. But even with those elements coming into play, it doesn't devolve into all the usual tropes we get associated with younger horror characters. The film strikes a nice balance between its weirder, more supernatural elements and these grounded elements with compelling characters we can root for. And because these two get to lean into the latter element a lot more, it makes them great protagonists with some naturalistic interactions, especially as we see early on them trying to deal with bullies at school. I will say though, I think McGraw gets some of the better lines throughout this, especially as she can be really funny, which is something that took me off guard about this as a whole. It's definitely not a horror comedy by any means, but it has much more of a sense of humor than I was expecting. It's nothing where it'll necessarily undercut the dramatic tension or anything like that, but these moments were really well timed, and they usually come in at just the right moments, and it'll be some great one-liners, especially towards the beginning before we see Finney get taken. Or there might be a few solid moments with a side character who winds up playing a much bigger part than I was expecting. And I gotta say, I was surprised by the amount of times I audibly laughed out loud at this. It helped break the tension in a way that it didn't feel like it was undermining something big that was happening. And that's exactly what I like in my movies. I like being able to feel a wide range of emotions with a nice balance, so that nothing's so serious and cynical that we get no joy from moments that are meant to feel satisfying, nor is something so goofy that we don't get to feel any emotional stakes whatsoever. And I thought this film found a nice balance of all that. It can feel really weighty and high stakes so that it leaves you in suspense all throughout the runtime, but it also doesn't lose sight of making sure its characters are compelling and contain distinct personalities, so that we can feel something beyond just sad or anything like that. So because of that, I had a really good time with this. The Black Phone is easily one of the year's best horror movies. It walks a fine line between being a somewhat bizarre, supernatural-driven movie, while also staying within its grounded moments for just the right amount of time, spending time with these well-written characters we can root for. While there were a few hokier elements here and there, it's otherwise a consistently engaging experience, thanks to its solid direction by Derrickson and a number of great performances, in particular a chilling Ethan Hawke. If horror is your thing, you definitely don't want to sleep on this one. The Black Phone gets an 8.5 out of 10. So let me know, did you see The Black Phone, or are you planning to see it, and what were your thoughts? Is he your favorite Scott Derrickson movie? Is he your favorite Ethan Hawke movie? Let me know in the comments below so we can discuss. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and share it, and for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching everyone, and keep having fun with film.